I used to be the biggest fan of SpongeBob as a little kid. I bought Nickelodeon merch and other things from them. As I grew into a teen, I was going through a garage sale with my mum. I spotted an old VHS tape, and it was labeled Cold. I looked on the back and it also had labeled Reef Blower in sharp writing that was wearing off. I always loved nostalgia, and I realized I never had the tape. I asked my mum. She said, "Sure, sweetie." I asked the old man who I bought it from, where he got it. He told me he got it from a thrift store 6 years ago, which was a copy of the episode from Nickelodeon, and an employee sold it as they didn't want it anymore, and apparently it was supposed to be a version with dialogue. I knew it never did have, but I heard it was intended to have some dialogue. So I wondered what it would be like with dialogue, so I took it home. My little brother was gonna come over anyway, so I could watch it with him. He was around 5.5 at the time. I slipped the tape in, and turned it on. I gave my little bro some popcorn and some Orange Crush. The title card said Cold with spider webs and a noose in the background. I was extremely confused. Why the hell would there be a noose in a show meant for kids? The unsettling part was the music was cheerful, but it was raspy and in reverse. Plus, wasn't this supposed to be Reef Blower? The bubble splash transition played as usual. Now, SpongeBob was at Patrick's house. Very cheerful music played. Patrick and SpongeBob were having a small conversation, until they got into a small argument. The argument graduated into a fist fight. I just thought it was another normal episode but was mistaken for a Reef Blower copy. That was until something shocking happened. SpongeBob said, "Patrick, you were nothing but a little piece of ST slimy as Gary says. Sucker CK." I was appalled. Keep in mind, the voice actors sounded exactly the same. SpongeBob sounded exactly like Tom Kenny doing the SpongeBob voice. My little brother only got one of the slurs. But he refused to leave as I was gonna kick him out of the living room so I could review this myself. Anyway, Patrick stood in shock. Tears filled his eyes. He frowned, and yelled something to SpongeBob. I forgot what he said. It was pretty vulgar anyway. They both stomped away, as Squidward watched laughing. Patrick stormed also into his rock. The bubble splash transition played PO. He sat in his tub. There was no sound, not even the sound of Patrick's blinking. He sat, with what looked like cuts on his wrist, and a bloody razor blade beside him, and sitting in a puddle of what looked like piss, and some cocaine. You could even see Patrick's part. I gasped, and this time, I demanded for my brother to leave the room. He left the living room screaming and crying. My mum was outside doing yard work. I watched, and Patrick's eyes were black voids. The tears looked very realistic, and slowly, faded to a tint of crimson. They turned to blood. I was horrified. He stormed out of the tub, with a shotgun. He went to SpongeBob's house, with blood flowing from his eyes. SpongeBob opened the door, and screamed. Patrick backed him up towards a wall, and had a gun to his head. Patrick let out a demonic growl, as his pink finger slowly went onto the trigger. I thought we were friends, but no. Now, any last words, you degenerate CT? SpongeBob sat, with a realistic tear running down his face, off his nose. He said burn in fire, as he knew he was gonna die. Patrick said FCKU, too. Then pulled the trigger. SpongeBob's body collapsed onto the floor, as realistic blood and tissue splattered on the wall, and dropped onto the floor. I yelled in shock. Patrick laughed hysterically, but not his normal laugh. It was demonic. The killer's inverted, and the screen went static, and went to another scene, of Squidward, with his eyes wide open, his body mutilated, and his entrails were 4 feet away from him. It lasted for about 4 seconds before fading to black, then a static screen, but with blood went for a second, showed 4 seconds of Sandy's tail chopped off and her body hanging from a tree. I started shaking violently. I felt sick to my stomach. I vomited some popcorn in my mouth, but held it back. It showed full frame of Patrick's face, his eyes voids, with blood and tears streaming from them, with demonic laughing. The image of him staring at the viewer lasted 10 seconds, before the screen turned to static, flashing, and then it shows Patrick on a stool with a rope in his hand, tying a noose. It panned for another split second, then showed Patrick hanging there. His body pale, and looking cold. There was kids screaming in the background, which I thought was outside. I grabbed a baseball bat. It went silent, then the episode ended like a normal episode, the calming credits music. I knew I was not gonna sleep that night. I grabbed the VHS tape, and had Mom take it back. Angry after reviewing it, she took it to Nickelodeon Studios. She got a phone call 7 hours later. They said they inspected everything about it. They said it aired at 3 a.m. in California, 4 times every year for 6 years. But they weren't sure why it did. But it never showed evidence of ever airing. Some unlucky people saw it when it aired. They got phone calls about it, but ignored it thinking it was a hoax. Until my mom turned it into them. To this day, I'm only starting to watch SpongeBob again. I have occasional nightmares from it. I'm just happy my little brother left. Or he will have been scarred for life. No one ever knows who made it, or what its origin is.